As I sit here trying to gather my thoughts and get into writing for the morning, I was reading a post by Jared Easley about some things to think about in terms of preparing for and reacting to some kind of nuclear disaster. And the post was very informative, but I disagree with a few of the things he said. I agree with the overarching message and some of his particulars. I think this is what very well thought is worth reading, is worth thinking about. And I texted him as much, so I think we'll see what he says. But I wanted to just make a quick post about something, because as I reflect upon that, I think, in case you're curious, my main pushback was I don't think most of these post-catastrophe plans will materialize in terms of any hope whatsoever that people have of staying in their homes. There are like 3 places in the United States, give or take, where you could actually pull something like that off. And as I reflect on why so few people realize that, and by the way, the critical variable is population density. You have to live in the middle of nowhere to pull something like that off. And as I reflect on why so few people know or believe this, I think the primary misunderstanding is human nature. This is a big topic to unfold, and in characteristic fashion, I just want to give you a little tidbit, little breadcrumbs to keep you going for now. And I'll explain this at length if I'm given the opportunity in time. Because it's so many things are actually drop dead simple. There's so much complexity in the world, but so many things are actually so simple. But the problem is we have so many layers of false tradition encoded into our mind that to slice through all of that, it's like a surgeon cutting through multiple layers of tissue to get to the tumor that they have to cut out. And you can't just hack the thing off. You got to slice through it very carefully, layer by layer. And I don't know if that's actually what surgeons do, but it's something that you can visualize at least. Human nature is evil. And one reason we don't realize this is because we have a mental block that prevents self-incrimination. You think of evil as this big bad wolf, boogeyman, Nazi general kind of person. Evil is actually ratting out your neighbor for not following COVID protocols. That's actual evil. It's not to say that the first thing isn't as bad as you think it is, but it's certainly to say that the second thing is way worse than you think. And the reason we resist this so fully is because it's self-incriminating. You might think because you're a religious person, or because you have some sort of academic degree, or because you put food on the table and you have kids, or because you have some profession where you're very specialized and you provide clear value, whatever. You might think that all of those things mean that you're not a bad person. But evil in a person is not a function of what they do that might be perceived as good. Jesus said, out of a wicked heart proceed wicked things, and out of a good heart proceed good things. It comes down to your motive. Good and evil isn't a question of what you do some or most of the time. It's a question of what you do all of the time. You might look, and I've explained this study before that this gentleman did, whose name I can't remember now, Asher. The Asher experiments, look them up. Basically what that says is almost everyone will do something that they know is wrong, even when there are very, very light consequences for doing the right thing. So negative peer feedback, just the slightest displeasure of your peers. Almost everyone will do what they know is dead wrong, at least some of the time. That's evil. Why? Because you can't say just because it's only some of the time, it's not that bad. Because when it counts, you're going to do the wrong thing. And when the consequences are even higher, the pressure, the resistance against doing the right thing, when the persecution for doing the right thing increases, you're going to do the wrong thing more often, and you'll do much more terrible things. The other thing that people don't realize is what Voltaire was credited as saying, that if you can convince people to believe absurdities, then you can get them to commit atrocities. The way that you convince normal people to do terrible things is you prime them in an emotional state. As you eradicate their ability to think rationally, they're very easy to manipulate. And they will do terrible things at your bidding. And even unbidden, they will just be reactionary, terrible people that do terrible things. And most people just have no clue how far down that path we've already gone. The only thing that needs to change for very normal seeming people to do absolutely terrible things is that the environment around them needs to change slightly. The unmerited prosperity that we are drowning in needs to be turned down just a little bit. There's a phrase, we're 3 days away from, what's the rest of it? You could put it in the comments if you know this phrase. Essentially, if the power went out for 3 days and there's no hope of it coming back, everyone would go nuts. And that's all it would take. And people just don't realize this. There's 3 days worth of food at the grocery store. When that runs out, you'll see the complete evaporation of what you think is modern civilization. I'm not talking about infrastructure. I'm talking about in people. The social contract will self-incinerate in 3 days. That's all it takes. And it's getting worse and worse because people are doing these horrible things like punching random strangers or robbing people or doing worse things than that in increasing frequency, even when the prosperity is still there, the unmerited prosperity. The lights are all still on. Everybody's still fat, dumb, and happy. So what do you think is going to happen when that rug gets pulled? As it gets pulled, it can either be an event or a process. We're in the process, but events will also come. So it's delusional to think that you can stay in your house if the grid goes down permanently. And it will. It will. I've told you before. Whatever the cause might be, it doesn't matter. But that all adds extra layers of this. If there's some EMP, nuclear warfare, invasion, whatever, people not showing up to work at the power plant because there's some kind of terrible pestilence, disease, epidemic, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if the grid goes down, you cannot stay where you are. Now, if it goes down because there's a nuclear attack, you're going to have to shelter in place in your basement if you have a house. If you have an apartment, you're in big trouble, but do the best you can. If you're in your basement of your house, you're going to be there for a couple weeks. And hopefully you've prepared to be able to do that. But after that, you better get the heck out of Dodge. You're going to put on a backpack. You're going to hike out. And that's where I deviate from Jared's advice, because I think it's an absolute waste of time and money to fiddle with solar-powered this and Faraday cage that. You get yourself a decent hiking backpack, some decent hiking boots, an all-season packable sleeping bag, a bivy cover, a ceramic filter for water. They have these bags, these plastic bags that are kind of tough, that are like supersized Nalgene bottles, but they're soft, so they pack well, and they can hold a lot of water and stuff like that. And you put your backpack on and you skedaddle, right? After the fallout period passes. Because you can't stay where you are. People are evil, and you don't realize it because you've got a mental block on it, but it's going to be laid out to you. But by the time you realize it, the cost of reacting appropriately is going to be much, 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 much higher than it is now. So don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. But start looking at the evidence that's all around you and base your decision on that. Open your eyes to what's already evident. It's already evident that people are evil. It's already evident that you can't stay in your present house unless you live in the absolute middle of nowhere. If these things happen, it's a basket of things that could cause you to have to abandon ship. And you're going to put a hiking backpack on and you're going to start walking. Now, what if you're in a physical condition where you can't do that? Well, do the best you can and adjust your mind to the reality of the situation. These things are important. The Lord talked about if you knew when this guy was going to come and rob you, you'd be prepared. And these things, the writing's on the wall. It's a question of when it happens. And this doesn't mean go do something stupid because you're being hasty. That's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm just saying every day is an important time that we're given to wrap our heads around reality a little tighter. And right now, people are just absolutely delusional in every way imaginable. And we need to start to self-cure and to correct ourselves on these things. Because it's like the stages of grief. You put it off as much as you can at whatever cost it requires for as long as you can. But then you're playing catch up, and on both sides of the equation, you're as bad off as you can be. So if you can be realistic about this early, then it will be what's best for you. Now, coming back to Jared's post, which, like I said, had a lot of great information, he's absolutely right in the focus of the post, which is get your life right with God. And he gives some actionable details there that are wonderful. We have to get our lives right with God. All of the stuff that's coming, it's not about surviving. That is not the point at all. These are all situations that God has designed to further his purpose, which is our greatest joy. It might be a funny thing to talk about that when we're sitting here talking about disasters to come and catastrophes to come. It's all designed by a loving God that knows everything. He cares about us much more than we can understand. And so how are you using these things to become a better person? Because that's what you take with you, is your character. How are you using these things to help others? Because charity is part of your character. So is justice. So is mercy. And so your development and exercise of these qualities, that matters more than anything else. Get your life right with God. Do what you can to help others. And so it's only as an extension of that, as a piece of that, that you should worry about all of these things. Because if you're not there, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, and you'll get picked off eventually anyway. The people that seek to save their lives will lose it. And the people who voluntarily lose their lives in subjection to the purpose of Christ will find something far better than they could ever get otherwise. So be aware of the evil in the hearts of men, starting with your own. You fix that, and you're going to get a lens on, it's like you're going to wake up one day and find yourself surrounded by zombies that are trying to eat you. And that's basically how life really is. And what this does is it increases the value of the people that you see that aren't brain-eating zombies. And it also helps you help those zombies. Because if you're like them and you all see each other with rose-colored glasses, you'll never get there. You'll never get to the point where you can really help them. And you'll never be bold enough to do it or effective enough to do it because you can't sincerely call anyone to repentance while you're still sinning. That's hypocrisy. It robs you of courage. It robs you of the testimony of the Spirit, which is what really persuades people. You will not have it while you're a hypocrite. You can try to persuade them mentally, but it's not going to go down into their hearts and minds. So the number one thing is to get yourself right with God.